What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now in this Metroid Prime 4 video, we have a comparison between the Switch 2 version versus the Switch 1 version for its graphics, and also the comparison between the Switch 2 version and of a version of an earlier build on Switch 2, dating back to that Treehouse demo and the initial trailer footage that Nintendo released for the Switch 2 version. There is some actually new differences that many people have missed or haven't even covered at all that we will be covering here for the first time on the channel. So if you do enjoy this content, guys, please hit the like button and we will get started. So first of all, we're going to go over the Switch 1 versus the Switch 2 version. And first, we're going to look at this footage that was captured by CYCU1. And we're going to take a look at the March footage for the Switch 1 version versus the latest trailer for the Switch 2 version, because there is some very interesting differences between these two versions, especially for the detail on the creatures and the levels themselves. And we're going to get into it though. But if you take a look at this right here, when the cutscene goes into the part where Samus is about to fight these creatures on planet Vuros, you will see that there's some big differences here between the Switch 2 and the Switch 1 versions. And I'm just going to highlight this part from their video here, and then we're going to go into my own screenshots I took from both different trailers, from the March Direct and from the trailer from a few days ago. You can see that there is quite a bit of difference between the detail of the creature's arms and the muscles and veins and everything here. If you look close, you can see that it's actually changed completely on some of these parts of the arms and everything. The texture is actually completely different. Switch 1 version here from March, Switch 2 version here from a few days ago. You can see more vein detail, more muscles, and actually even the chest itself is a little different. A little shaped a little differently here, possibly. And you may think that, well, this could just be a fact of it being lower resolution, and that is definitely the case. But the actual textures themselves don't appear to even be there on some of these parts of the creature's arm, and even the tree here as well. Looks like they added actually new textures on top of the arm here. And the tree itself looks like they have even more detailed textures as well. It's not just the same textures being output at a high resolution. It definitely does have a lot of the same textures being output at a high resolution, but some of these textures are actually brand new. So as you can see here with this tree, there's less detailed textures, and then much more detailed textures here with fine details being added. Right here in the arms, right here in the arms and the fingers even. You can just see a lot more detail here on the shoulder even as well. Some of the stuff is just gone completely. And even on the head here. And this like tongue looking thing. Looks like there's more detail there as well. And in when it opens its mouth, there's the ripple effect here on the mouth is different. You can see that there's just more detail on the Switch 2 version. It just looks like it's rendered a little bit differently even. And if you look at the trees, like the actual bark on the trees and the vines, they are also rendered in more detail. They're flat and just less defined, of course, on Switch 1, as you might expect. And some of the placement of the cutscene, also of the items, you could say the vines, are different as well. They're just actually just moved differently. It's the same exact cutscene, but just output in a different, kind of rearrangement, you could say. But this looks quite a bit better on Switch 2, like noticeably better. And a lot of this does have to do with the resolution, but some of the textures are in fact revamped. You can see it right there, right here. Some of these textures are just not present on Switch 1. And you can see right here that the veins, right here in particular and here in particular are gone on Switch 1. They're not even there. So you could totally see that very apparently. But that's not all. There's another part of this cutscene we compare to the Switch 1 version. If we go also to the scene they played right before that, before the creature just, like makes its calling sound to attack Samus, you see here the Switch 1 version for March 2025. In the Nintendo Direct, they showed that 3-minute trailer for Switch 1. All the links will be in the description, of course. But take a look at this here on Switch 1. They have like this fully letterbox cutscene. But on the Switch 2 version that they displayed the same scene just a few days ago, they actually have this without the letterbox. And you can see more details as well. If you look at this looks like a tree trunk, kind of like they're showing from the above area here where the trees kind of go up and you're looking down towards Samus. If you look back on the Switch 1 version, far less detail is noticeable here on the Switch 1 version, and some of it is being cut off, true, but if you look close at this vine tree bark area here, it's actually been changed on Switch 2 completely. There's just like, there's more detail there, more textures here, more fine little like bumps in the tree bark, basically, or tree trunks, you could say. It's totally different here. The texture has totally been changed from the Switch 1 version, and even the little leaves and everything have been changed as well. Not 100% changed, but they definitely have different textures added to them. You can see that right here, right? And if you look over here on this side, you see the wall textures. Higher resolution on Switch 2. They do look to be the same, actually, the same textures, just output higher resolution, but there's more added to the Switch 2 version. There's a vine here, looks like a little vine that comes down. That's not actually there on Switch 1. But really interesting attention to detail here that you would probably never even notice unless you do a side-by-side comparison, which is, you know, really good on Retro Studios. They're very well known for putting high attention to detail, and it just adds to the overall ambience of the scene and immersion of the scene when you add those little fine details. And the texture resolution basically of the ground is increased on Switch 2 dramatically right there. Just the overall resolution of the shadows is higher, and you could see more detail on the gravel and the ground there. Very, very clear. But we're going to go even closer on the Switch 1 to Switch 2 version here on the creature yet again, and the tree and the vines and everything. So Switch 2 version right here, Switch 1 version. Now this is extremely apparent to me. You can see the detail just is way higher on Switch 2 versus Switch 1. In fact, looks like they changed the way the actual muscle structure is of the creature here to be different than Switch 1. Like, it looks like the creature has less of a defined muscle here and more muscle deformation here on Switch 2. And actually even more detail in the arm you can see very apparent here. I guess you can kind of see like the joints where they connect. That's just my guess. Of course, we have to see these more creatures of these in action. But like the joints and the muscles where they connect, there's totally different texture here on Switch 2 versus Switch 1. And the head, you know, like octopus-like tentacle things on the head here are revamped with better textures on Switch 2 than on Switch 1. The actual hands of the creatures are more detailed. You can totally see it there. And also there's like a light sheen on one of the legs or arms of this creature. They have like 6 legs or arms, you could say. It's that the light sheen is reduced or not quite as good here on Switch 1. On Switch 2, it's actually there, reflecting some light of the area. I don't really think this is real light, but it's something that normal mapping does on creatures in games. It usually has like these little sheens to make the objects or bodies of a creature to look more 3D defined. So that effect is less apparent on Switch 1, more so on Switch 2. Okay, so you could say this probably has better normal mapping than Switch 1 does from that. Yet again, clear defined veins and muscles on these legs and arms of the creature. Not so much on Switch 1. And then, of course, also tree branches and leaves of this much more detail in Switch 2 than on Switch 1. You can actually see where the leaves and branches break up from each other much more clearly. So this is a very, very good example of the differences between the Switch 1 version and the Switch 2 version just from this right here. So what about the Switch 2 version versus its own Switch 2 version though? Let's go ahead and get into that next. So here we have a picture of the Treehouse footage for when Samus was fighting one of these bosses here towards the end of the demo. You can see that they're in this kind of dome area and they're fighting, and there is the missile icon here and the map of the areas to the top right. Now, it was changed actually. The missile icon was changed to something else recently, but actually I don't think anyone noticed this, and I just noticed this in this recent footage, is that the map was actually changed. The 3D map was changed in the latest build of this game on Switch 2. So this is the Treehouse footage here from April, and then you go to the latest trailer. Here's the newest trailer from the similar area that they're fighting the boss. You can see the missile icon has been changed to a brand new different icon. But the map of the dome has been changed as well in the Switch 2 version. Remember, this is the Switch 2 version versus the Switch 2 version. So this newest build right here does in fact have more detail on the 3D map in the right-hand corner of the display for Samus. It's a very little detail, but I do think this does make it a little bit of a difference here to show you that there's actually 3D dome effect that they're displaying here, that Samus is in this area. There's more of a upper and lower portion of this area in a dome, and on here it's just kind of like a regular circular area with less detail. Now, in regards to the changes, this is kind of a small change, right? The map in this area and the missile icons and everything. What about a pretty big change? There is a big change for the Switch 2 build of the game versus the initial version that they showed on Switch 2 in the Switch 2 Direct in April versus the latest build of Metroid Prime 4 now. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so here we have the Nintendo Switch 2 edition. This is a screen cap from the footage that Nintendo showed in their own Switch 2 Nintendo Direct when they announced the Switch 2 version of Metroid Prime 4. This is one of the areas they showed right off the bat to show Samus and show the much higher detailed textures that they had versus the Switch 1 version. So yes, this looks really good. You could see a lot more detail in the textures versus what they had when they initially showed the Switch 1 version in the same area, more defined, right? But what about the latest build of this game that was shown just a few days ago? Remember, this is the Switch 2 edition. This is what they showed in April on the Switch 2 Nintendo Direct. Now, here is the newest version of Metroid Prime 4. Same exact area, same exact screen of this same area that they showed a couple days ago. Now, see that? The texture has been completely changed on the tree. These trees now have brand new textures on them for the Switch 2 edition in the latest build. This is from the trailer, the Survive trailer that was released just a few days ago in November. No, go back to what they had here in April on the Switch 2 Direct, the Switch 2 edition. You can see the textures here versus the new one, old version of Switch 2, new version of Switch 2. You can see the textures have been revamped. They look more defined, actually, more rounded even. Looks like they give it more depth here on the trees. However, from what I could tell, these may be the only textures from the footage we've seen so far that have been revamped versus the rest of the game, because if you look at the other textures here, like on the rocks, they still look the same. Here on the rock designs and the pillars, they have the same texture still as what they had when they initially showed the Switch 2 edition. However, these trees and the bark of the trees, you could say, the skin of the trees, they have completely different textures. Here's the original version they showed initially. Still looks great, I would say. But yet again, Retro Studios went a little bit extra mile here and gave these trees and their trunks more rounded features to make them look more realistic. And who knows what else they've done. They probably have even more areas that look better than the initial version they showed as well, especially versus the Switch 1 version. But this is definitely something I wanted to bring out as a direct comparison to the Switch 2 version itself to its own version. This is not just comparing the Switch 2 version to the Switch 1 version. This is a very clear example of the Switch 2 version getting an upgrade graphically in its textures before the game is released. The extra polish that Retro Studios is known for doing, they've been doing it with this game. They went the extra mile, and they're actually making the Switch 2 version stand out even more so versus the Switch 1 version. And this is only good things that we can look forward to for the final game. I'm very impressed by this, and I can't wait to play. Obviously, we just got a few more weeks to go. And of course, since I'm excited to play Metroid Prime 4 very, very soon, we are actually playing through the entire trilogy on the channel live for the entire month of November. So please come out and say hi in the chat when we're playing those games during the week, and subscribe for more, guys. If you do enjoy this content, please hit the like button, and I'll talk to you very soon in the next video. Have a great day.